Well, thanks everybody. Welcome to the second module in the church planting course. This one is on the 4 different relationships that Ascending Church will have with a church planter. As I said, I used to coach church planters in our area for 10 years while pastoring a church, and much of that involved working with Ascending Church or encouraging churches to become Ascending Church. This dynamic is just rife with potential hurt feelings, rife with misunderstanding. To be honest with you, it's much like, if you've ever raised a teenager, it's much like raising a teenager, where you go through the process of being dependent, and then before you can get to sort of this mutual adult relationship, you have to go through this stretching, sometimes painful relationship of independence. So you go from dependent to independent, and then you grow back together to interdependence. And that's really similar to what it's like to send out a church and send out a church plant. We sent out multiple church plants. I coached multiple church planters, and in doing so, had many conversations with sending churches, and this is what I've learned after that time. So 4 primary ways that a church can, 4 relationships that a sending church has with a planter, with a planting church. So number 1 is what I call the premature birth. Unfortunately, I've seen this. Unfortunately, I'm actually working currently with a sending church that has hired me to coach a plant that's a few years in and struggling, and in diagnosing the situation, I thought this is a premature birth. This is something trying to revitalize something that maybe went out too soon. So the first is a premature birth. And so this is initiated by the sending church for various reasons, but the planter is not ready. Initiated, I go, why would they send somebody out who wasn't ready? Well, think about like again, it's very similar to a premature baby, where there is life there for sure, but that little guy is going to be struggling with health and other issues because it was born too soon. And so this happened when, say, a church, an existing church, needs to cut back financially. So there's somebody on staff, and all of a sudden they're kind of like, hey, go plant a church. And it's a way of helping with their budget, which is not a great way to reduce staff costs. Or maybe the pastor and that staff person, their relationship has weakened. And so I liken this to, there was a comedian you probably have never heard of, and I think the 1940s, his name was W.C. Fields, and he was sort of that comic, that drunk, abrasive comic, and there have been that genre of comics throughout history. But W.C. Fields kind of had this line, whether he actually said it or not, it was attributed to him. And in his drunken kind of with the cigar in his mouth, and he's abrasive, and he would say, "Get out of here, kid, you bug me. Get out of here, kid, you bug me." And when I see premature plants, I go, oh, that was a W.C. Fields plant. Somebody said, "Get out of here, kid, you bug me." Or they over-spiritualize it with, "I think God is calling you to plant a church over there." Get out of here, kid, you bug me. And so in that, the church will recognize maybe even a calling, or maybe even encourage the calling, but take no responsibility and do very little equipping or training. So they launch independently. They may or may not maintain relationships afterwards. And the reality is that calling or pushing alone is not adequate for a successful, healthy church plant. A healthy, successful church plant needs training prior to a launch and support and encouragement after the launch. So the first is a premature birth. The second is what I call the sibling plant. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I have 5 older brothers and sisters, and I love them. And sometimes I would watch an older sibling move out of the house, go to college or get a job or move away, and then come back. And then maybe move out and then come back. And my relationship then to the sibling was, I really like you, but I have no responsibility for your health or well-being, because I'm just a sibling. I'm not your parent. And sometimes churches are sent out with that, especially if the sending church is a young church or a small church. They might not feel or have the wherewithal to parent a child church plant. They just send them out as a sibling. A lot of churches operate this way. There is an upside to the sense of, hey, who am I to hold you back? Yeah, go do your own thing. And there's an upside to that, but there's a downside to, again, a lack of training and a lack of support afterwards. And maybe they'll give a one-time financial gift, or maybe there'll be some prayer or encouragement or some relational connection, but it's like a sibling. And the planter then, just like my older siblings, I took no responsibility for them financially or emotionally or career or anything. I just watched and I was their friend. In the same way, then, the planter is responsible for raising money, getting their own equipping, getting their own network, building their own team, doing everything on their own. On the downside, this could actually be a little passive-aggressive, where the sending church says to them, we're happy for you, just don't expect anything from us. So relationship is good, but again, there has to be preparation and equipping and post-launch support afterwards. That's what makes a healthy church. We see in this, actually in the scripture, we see when Barnabas took John Mark, there was a split between Barnabas and Paul. Paul took Silas. Barnabas took John Mark, went out to, church tradition says they planted churches throughout Cyprus. But we see Paul taking no responsibility for Barnabas or what he's doing. There was just a split. There's like, hey, dude, we used to be partners, now we're not, so go do your own thing. And so I can see sort of that sibling dynamic between Paul and Barnabas, where they are not, where Paul is not taking real responsibility for the things that Barnabas and John Mark did. And so when there is this sort of breakdown, sometimes it's sibling and it's good. Sometimes there's actually a breakdown in vision or a breakdown in relationship, or sometimes there's a breakdown in culture, and that planter emerging needs to kind of go do their own thing. And that's where a lot of the hurt comes involved. One of the places that hurt really happens in church plants is when someone wants to go do something and it is very dissimilar to the sending church. Then the sending church is like, what? You didn't like what we were doing all these years? You didn't really want to be doing this? And we get in our head and it kind of spins out. And so there's the sibling plant where there is no relationship. Again, maybe one-time gift. The third is the rebel plant. The third is the rebel plant, which is similar to the first one, but this one is initiated by the planter. It's initiated by the planter. And there have been, throughout church history, lots of conflict and disagreements and separation for all kinds of reasons. You look at the Great Schism of 1054 between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Those involved, which is really interesting in today's environment, those involved a difference of politics, difference of theology, difference of culture. Obviously, the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, a Great Awakening in the 1700s, which led to the growth of the Baptists, the Methodists, the Presbyterians in the Great Awakening in the 1700s. There are certainly more modern examples. There are a number that kind of come to mind. One of the more obvious ones is Aimee Semple McPherson was part of the Assemblies of God. She was a leader there. She went through a divorce, kind of got removed from the Assemblies of God, but she kept on ministering. She actually had a very vibrant, dynamic church, obviously here in the Los Angeles area. And she had a vision of the four squares, the four components of the gospel. And though she started to call her movement the Four Square. So the Four Square came out of the Assemblies of God. Obviously, many other ones that go on. But today, do you know that the Four Square, for even as weird as it started, or maybe you say, well, that's not biblical, that shouldn't have happened, she shouldn't be ministering for 10,000 reasons. Today, the Four Square boasts 100,000 churches in over 150 nations. People are getting saved, discipled, and the work of God continues. So I'm not here to minimize the pain or the confusion of a split. They are complicated. They can be very disruptive. The problem is, I think only in hindsight do we see, oh, this was a genuine move of the Lord. How does the Lord then work through complicated, messy people? Well, one of my favorite quotes is, God uses broken people because that's his only choice. Let's not start throwing stones at something that God does, even as confusing as it may be. But again, every generation says, God is doing something new. Don't you perceive it? There are going to be new wineskins for the new wine. And what's interesting is all these young planters, been there, young planters with all this spit and vinegar going out, going to blaze a new trail and do something great for God. They actually are successful, and then they become the old guard. And then there's another generation that comes behind them, and that new generation challenges them. And sometimes that church that started young and vibrant and cutting edge and different has somehow or another become the old guard. And somebody new rises up underneath them, and sometimes they say, no. And the cycle continues again and again and again. We have to be open to the new things that God is doing in new generations. Sometimes it's pride and arrogance in the flesh. And sometimes it's God working through broken people. Not every split is rebellion. Sometimes it is. So the rebel plant. And somehow or another, God uses some of those anyway. Complicated. Number 4 is the healthiest and the best, and the one that we want to encourage and promote, and that is the mother-child or the mother-daughter church plant. It's the healthiest, the most fruitful, and the most repeatable is churches multiplying churches. A healthy church multiplies. Do you know that things that are healthy will grow? Principle of life. A church that is healthy typically will grow, and sometimes even if it doesn't grow numerically, it can grow with the level of discipleship in the people, and it can grow and multiply by sending out church planters. You know, in the last module, I told the story about how when we sent out 50 people to go plant a church and how God provided miraculously all of the financial resources that they went, provided them in one check. Well, do you know that within a couple weeks, we had gained 50 new people, and I have no idea how. I kept going, where were you guys? Where were you guys a month ago? How is it that our numbers were the same 2 weeks after we sent out 50 people to go plant a church? I don't know. And all of the jobs, roles, responsibilities that we had that were vacant because we sent them out, they were all filled also in a month or two. It was quite remarkable. That's not always the case, but I just see the Lord's validation in that. So there is the sense of a mother-child, intentional sending, multiplying, healthy relationships. When Paul and Barnabas, they were sent by the church at Antioch, they prayed, they fasted, they laid their hands on them, and it appears that the entire church was behind this mission that they were doing. That's a great way to send people out. That sending church in this relationship takes responsibility for equipping and training before they go, for financial support. It can be actually a benefit to the people to be financially contributing to that church plant because it keeps everybody on mission, to provide for them legally and financially, to provide the oversight, to provide coaching and encouragement. So there is this goes right into the raises framework that I have for raising up leaders inside your church. And real quick, that framework of raises is recognize who the leaders are, recognize the leaders that God has given you. You just sense something about them. Recognize in the natural and the supernatural the leaders that God has given you in order to sow into. Recognize them, activate them, call them into ministry, challenge them. Recognize, activate, instruct. So you are teaching and equipping them. You're instructing them on what they need to do. You are sending them out into ministry, and sending could be as simple as them starting a new small group. That's sending them into ministry. After they do that, there has to be a sense of evaluation. So you send and then you evaluate, and then after you evaluate, you don't disqualify, you support. And you see all of these steps, all 6 of these steps, easy acronym to remember, RAISES: recognize, activate, instruct, send, evaluate, and support. And you see all of that throughout the Gospels. This is the model that Jesus did with the disciples. He went up and he prayed all night and he recognized who God had given him. And it says in Scripture that Jesus picked those he wanted to be his disciples. He activated them into ministry. He said, come and follow me. He instructed them. He said, take tunic, take this, don't take that. Go to the man of peace. And there are very specific instructions. And when you go, say this and do that. Very specific instructions on what he wanted the disciples to do when he sent them out. He modeled it, he showed them, and then he sent them out. He gave them instruction. He sends them out. They come back and they go, hey, one of these things didn't work. We tried to cast a demon out of somebody, it didn't work. So when he launched somebody into ministry, the quality of ministry drops normal. That's not a reason to disqualify. It just re-instruct. And then when they go out and they do it themselves, you then have a supporting relationship. That's where you are more peer-to-peer. After Jesus sent out the 12, he sent out the 72. Very similar instructions. I just wonder, it's not in Scripture, me just thinking, what role did the 12 have in the sending of the 72? It doesn't say. I just wonder if the 12 led the 72 on some level. If Jesus was raising up the 12 to be multipliers in the 72. So, we need to bring training, equipping, support, and post-launch coaching. Post-launch coaching. A quick word on finances with sending out church plants. The amount that a church raises or is given as they plant, there is a direct correlation to the success of that church in 5 years. Mind-blowing. If the church raises $2,000, they could make it. It's just a much harder road. If a church raises $50,000, that's better. If they raise $100,000, even better. And so it's not only about money, but money is a tool, and it can be an empowering tool that will lead to the success of that church. So raising support on the front end and also coaching on the back end. Ed Stetzer and North American Mission Board, they have statistics about the coaching effect. It says when a church planter is paired with a consistent trained coach, the survival and success rate jump dramatically. Having a regular coach increases the odds of a church surviving by 135 to 250%, depending upon the frequency of the coaching. Guys are out there, they're launched, and they just go, I don't even know what to do. What do I do next? How do I plan my week? What are my goals? What are my values? What am I doing? And so that sense of encouragement on the back end and this ongoing partnership, those churches that are resourced and coached well tend to then not only be successful, but they become multiplying churches. And that's the goal, is that we multiply the multipliers, is that we want more and more churches that can send out more and more churches, regardless of what dynamic and regardless of what kind of church they go, what kind of church that they send out. And so, real quick, what can you do today? 3 things that you can do today if you're inspired by this to be a sending church. 3 things you can do today. 1, make sure that you are mission focused in all areas. That you're moving your congregation from consumers to disciples in all areas. Send out missionaries. Talk about evangelism. Talk about international missions. Talk about multiplication. Ask your small group leaders to raise up other small group leaders. Have part of your culture mission. Have part of your culture moving forward that we have purpose and vision and mission, and we are being called into something great. Become mission focused. 2, build a leadership development pipeline at every level. Every leader has a job to find and raise up the next leader. I don't care whether you're leading the coffee team on a Sunday morning. I don't care whether you're overseeing small groups. From the top to the bottom to the top, every leader's job is in part to raise up other leaders. So build that leadership development pipeline at every level. And third, is practice generosity. Practice generosity. Be willing to give away money. Start to give away money now. Give away leaders. Give away staff. Give away volunteers. Give away resources. The funny thing in God's kingdom is you never lose what you give away. When we were, giving the shorter version, we were going to buy a building, and we were going to raise money. We were going to do a bond campaign. It was very complicated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at the church, and we don't have the people to raise money to buy the building that we were in. But what we'd done years before is the third Sunday of every month, we took up a second offering and contributed that to the building fund. So we had this building fund. Early on in our plant, within the first year, I was driving in and the Lord spoke to me and the Lord said, give it away. And I was like, give what away? And I was like, oh, today's offering. And so I knew that just in my spirit, in my heart, that we were to give away that offering to another church that was in need. And so I quick elders board meeting before church. I said, hey guys, driving in today, I feel like the Lord said to give away today's offering. And I remember one guy saying, look, most of, we were the first year of a plant, and he goes, most of what we bring in goes to your salary and goes to pay you what we can. So the biggest risk is you. If you feel this is the Lord, then we'll go with it. So we did. We gave away the money. We told the congregation, we gave everything away that week, and the next week our income doubled, and we learned a lesson. A couple years later, I was driving to church. I was thinking about a friend's church who is in need, and I felt like the Lord said it to me again. He said, give it away. And I was kind of mad, like, really, Lord? Every time a church is in need, like, we have to give it away? And I kind of had a bad attitude about it. But I need to be obedient, so I gathered the elders together and I said, hey, I feel like the Lord spoke to me again, and we're supposed to give away our whole income from this week. Taking up the tithe and offering, we told the church, we're going to do this again. We're going to give away everything we bring in. Took up the offering, and it was bigger now because we had grown. We're a few years into the church plant. And the next Sunday came. We did not double. It was small. I'm like, uh-oh, maybe that wasn't the Lord. Uh-oh, now we're in financial trouble. 2 weeks after that, we had a huge spike in giving, and the Lord actually provided everything that we gave away. And the Lord was beginning to develop faith muscles in our congregation and in me. Skip forward back to years and years later when we're trying to raise money to buy the building we're in. And in praying about it, and the Lord said to me again, he said, give it away. And I'm like, give away our offering again? Lord, you and I have done that. I mean, you've built faith in me, okay? And it was silent. It was like the Lord was saying, no, I didn't say give away the offering. And he was just quiet. And I'm like, you mean the building fund? You want me to give away the whole building fund, which was substantial at this point? And that's the seed money to buy the building. We've been saving for this for like 10 years. Now we're just going to give it away? And there was just silence. I'm like, oh no. Long story short, meetings, the board and the elders, we came to the conclusion God was calling us to give away the building fund before we started our own capital campaign. Good night. Gave it away. Myself and an intern went to other churches in an impoverished area near where our church was. And that church needed a building. We gave them 10 grand. That church needed new paint, and so we gave them 15 grand. And we just literally gave away all of the money that we've been saving for about 10 years. And I felt like the Lord was saying that you need to sow into the very thing that you need. If you need a building, sow into other people's buildings. And then somebody on staff said that their husband wanted to meet with me, and I met with them, and lo and behold, they worked for a company that went public. This is about 3 or 4 months later. And because that company went public, we bought a building. They donated, they were very kind and gracious and mature in the Lord. They donated 10% of their stock options of their company, of their tech company in San Francisco going public. They donated 10% to the church, and we got a building. Unbelievable. Praise the Lord for that. Here's my encouragement. My encouragement is develop generosity, develop mission now, develop leadership development now, so that when you plant a church, it's not this abrupt thing. It's a continuation of everything that God's been doing in you. It's the next logical step for the congregation when they know that you're on mission, when they know that you are generous and that you're leading and leaning into these things, when they know that you have a pipeline of leaders, and we're going to send out leaders, but we have a pipeline of other emerging leaders. So my encouragement for you today is to do those three things and watch what God's going to do. See you next module.